most people have never, not only have they not done the job of CEO, they don't even get to spend a lot of time with the CEO. And so how do you manage an organization when most of the issues aren't in your area of expertise is a very different job than being the executive in charge of a particular function within your area of expertise.
Joel, thanks for being with us today. We're thrilled to have you.
Great to be here.
Welcome. Okay, let's dive in. So you've developed a framework called the CEOS. We have your book right here. It's been a helpful read. And this whole topic is going to be on goal setting and at the CEO level, which has been kind of your core message for a long time.
Yes.
And so you've developed a framework called the CEOS, and it really focuses on 3 mental models and specifically for CEOs. But I'd love to have you, if you would, elaborate on those 3 mental models. How did they support the process of goal setting within an organization?
Sure. So I started teaching a course for CEOs about 15 years ago when I was chairman of what they call the Austin Technology Council. And we decided that we needed more capital in Austin. But if we had more capital, we weren't sure we had the CEOs that knew what to do with it either. And so when you start teaching a subject, you really learn a lot about the subject and you have your own ideas. But when you start putting them down on paper and trying to explain, you need simple models to explain those and test those with the people you teach. And so over time, I've developed numerous of these models. And, it starts with people. A model for people. Most of us have an internal model for people, but it's not very helpful. It's the one we learned as a kid. We look at people and we see if they're tall or short or part of our tribe or part of another tribe. Or then when we get into our teenage years, whether they're a potential mate or not. But none of those things really help us from a business perspective when we're dealing with employees. And so we start with a mental model of people. I believe every individual is a unique collection of naturally occurring behaviors. And we need to understand that we have our own set of naturally occurring behaviors that causes a filter in the way we view the world. And if we don't understand how to use those naturally occurring behaviors, when they're good, when they're bad, we tend to think the way we are is the way everyone should be. And that's not the right way to build a business of people. And then the second model we talk extensively about is just what is a business and how do you build a sustainable business? And one of the things that a lot of people don't think about, they think, oh, I just need to build a product. I need to sell it. I need to do that without running out of cash. And that works in the early stages of a business. But once you get to scale, you need to understand that really to build a sustainable business, you have to consistently provide value to customers, consistently provide value to employees, and consistently provide value to your shareholders. And that's a balancing act that's very tough to do. And you've got to keep all 3 in mind at the same time. If you get too focused on one, you really run off the tracks and cause the business to fail. And then the third thing is actually what is the job of the CEO? And this is probably the one that's least understood. Most people have never, not only have they not done the job of CEO, they don't even get to spend a lot of time with the CEO. There's no junior CEO job in most companies where you just follow the CEO around. And so people tend to get to the CEO role by developing expertise in a particular functional area, be it sales or finance or whatever. And so they see the world very much from a sales perspective or a finance perspective. And then when you put them in the CEO role, turns out 9 of the 10 problems they have to deal with have nothing to do with sales, their area of expertise. And so how do you manage an organization when most of the issues aren't in your area of expertise is a very different job than being the executive in charge of a particular function within your area of expertise.
And you probably see routinely over and over and over that they're put into this position with you said it, there's no real training, there's no real roadmap, it's right?
Exactly.
So you just show up and you're there and you got to figure it out.
Yes, often it's very random. For some reason a CEO moves on or whatever, and suddenly the board's faced with this decision, and they find somebody and they've got a great sales guy or something, and he interviews very well for the position, and so people say, oh well, yeah, he's a great sales executive, he'll make a great CEO, and that's like saying a great basketball player would be a great baseball player. It is rare that you find both skills in the same individual.
So you've mentioned sales leaders a couple times.
Sure.
That seems to be a role that naturally moves into CEO function, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And
that's
right or wrong, it'd be my first question. And then secondly, who do you think does best coming from where? Do you see a winning title kind of coming in?
Well, so the way I would answer it is if you told me you wanted to be CEO and you said, what should my career path be? The CEO role is a generalist role. So I'd want you to have broad experience. Sales is great experience, but I'd also want you to have marketing experience. I'd also want you to have customer experience. I'd also want you to have HR experience. I want you to have finance experience. And so the people who have really specialized in an area tend, in my opinion, to make the worst CEOs because, again, they see the whole thing as just a big sales job or a big marketing job or whatever, when the people who can see broader across all the functional areas and understand that it's the interaction of all those functional areas to make a real business operate and be sustainable.
Yeah. What's the path, though, for there? Where do you find that person?
Yeah, where do you find that person? Well, so in general, experience in the CEO role to me is hugely valuable, regardless of size. Now, there are some kind of size metrics, but it's interesting. A lot of people think, the job gets more complicated kind of linearly with size, that running 100 people and running 200 people, well, 200 people is twice as complicated as running 100 people. And that's not really the way I've experienced the CEO job. And so what I see in the CEO job is, from 1 to about 20 or 25 employees. Most CEOs are what I call a project manager CEO. They know what everyone does in the organization. Not only are they the CEO, but they're really fulfilling all the executive functions. They're making all the decisions. And so the way that business works is you pass all the data up to the decision maker. They make the decisions. They control what everybody does. And you really, in that stage, need a bunch of doers to be successful. When you get past about 25, 30, somewhere in their employees, CEOs often experience a lot of tension because it exceeds their capacity to keep track of what everybody's doing, manage what everybody's doing. And so what you need to do from that 25 to 100 category is bring in executives that have functional expertise and hand off decision-making in each of those areas to a functional expert. Whereas when you wake up north of 100 employees, you've got a full executive team in place, then there becomes a full-time CEO job at scale. The interesting thing to me is I've run everything from a 250-person high-growth startup to a 4,000-person public company. And those two jobs, the 250-employee job and the 4,000-person job, were not as different from each other as you might expect. They were very similar because I had a full executive team, I had a board, there were a few individual contributors I dealt with, but it wasn't dramatically different. But the job from 25 employees to 250 employees is a dramatically different job.
Joel, a big part of what you write on and speak on and coach on is this idea. Goal setting is a big part of it, right? Mm-hmm. So talk about that. What are some of the common mistakes CEOs make? How do you help them avoid those pitfalls?
Well, that's the fundamental transition that you get when you go from this 25 to 100 or 200 employee is when you're 25 employees, you are data-centric in the way you run the business. All the data is passed up to you. You consume the data. You make decisions. When you get to 250 employees, you can't do that anymore. You now have to set the goals and the decision-making criteria and pass that information down to the employees so that people at the lower levels can make the same decision you would make if you were sitting there in their chairs. And so just the nature of the whole job changes. And you have to become goal-centric because if you're data and task-centric at 250 people, you'll drive everybody in your organization crazy and you won't be very successful.
So this shift to a goal-centric way of operating, I've heard you say that goal setting is more laborious than it needs to be, and you have a way of thinking about it that simplifies it. So tell us, how should it look? What should goal setting look like?
Yeah, a lot of people have, kind of blank paper syndrome when it comes to goal setting, right? You stare at that blank sheet of paper and it's really hard to write the first sentence, second sentence. It's a lot easier if you can draft something and start from there. So where I start with goal setting for an organization is the simple mental model that there's kind of 6 functional areas of the business. There's sales, marketing, and product that are on the internal side, and then there's customers, shareholders, and employees on the external side. And so when I do goal setting, I look at each of those areas and say, let's say 3 years out. So if we look 3 years from today, we say, where do we want to be? What if we had all our customers gathered together here and we could get the Vulcan mind meld and understand the essence of what they wanted from us? How could we best provide value to the customers? And then we have the same conversation about employees. If we had all our employees gathered here, how could we best provide value out in 3 years to employees? And the same thing for shareholders, same thing in sales. What's the most important thing we're doing there? Marketing and product. And so that gives you kind of a framework. Because what happens a lot of times, again, when you have CEOs who have functional expertise, you ask them to set goals out in the future, and 4 out of the 5 goals will be sales related if they're a salesperson or finance related if they're a finance person. So we want to make sure we spread and have goals across each functional area of the business so that everybody in the business can see how they tie to at least one of our long-term goals in the business.
So you said 3 years out. So you think 3 years out, that's kind of a good mile marker, and then you back it up to what, quarters?
Then I back it up to quarters. I go straight from that 3-year goals to a set of quarterly goals for the company. And so then once you have the 3-year goals, you just basically look at those and you say, okay, well, we told shareholders we were going to do $30 million in revenue by the end of 3 years. What do we need to do this quarter to be on path to do that? Right. And so it's, a quarter is a very short period of time, but it builds by setting quarterly goals instead of a yearly plan. Year to me is way too long. I can't really know what's going to happen in a year reasonably. Often we set a yearly goal by the April or May. It doesn't matter anymore. Nobody's paying attention. So the beauty of quarterly goals is it gives you the ability and trains the organization to be agile. It trains the organization that every 90 days we're going to relook at the situation and we may change direction. Now, a lot of quarters, the goals may be very similar quarter to quarter, but if COVID happens or something happens in the middle, new information becomes available, we've got an organization that is built in the capacity to change. And change is very hard in organizations. So if you don't build that model kind of in where you can move quarter to quarter, it's very hard often to turn organizations as agilely as you need to in the modern environment.
So we've got 90 days, we've got a company or organization goal or goals, and then you've got departmental goals. How do you keep people kind of focused and in lockstep together throughout that?
Well, you basically follow the biggest life hack I've learned is that it turns out if you write your goals down, there's about a 25% greater chance of achieving them.
It's just
shocker.
Wild, but it's
shocking, right? But it happens. And then if you have some independent party other than yourself ask you each week, how's it going on that goal? That's another 25% hack. And so that's what we do. We write goals down in a company, and then every week we go to a meeting and we say, how's it going, Bethany? How's it going?
Yeah.
How's that goal? Are you going to get there or not? And that gives you a much greater chance of achieving those goals. And it's amazing how many times I go into companies and I ask about goals, and they'll say, oh, yeah, we set goals. And I say, can I see them? And then there's the hemming and hawing. Oh, well, we didn't get around to it this quarter. I'm like, oh, did the quarter start? You didn't know it was going to start? Why have we not done it? And so a lot of this is pretty simple discipline. Like in many things, you don't get better one day. You don't make the whole leap one day. You got to do a little bit every day. And if you keep doing it long enough and build that habit, then it really provides value.
That's why I have so much respect for like Olympic athletes or something where they, because they set a goal and then they're the ones that show up to the gym at 4 a.m. in the shadows, in the dark, doing everything that needs to be done to get to that goal. And nobody sees it. Nobody knows,
versus, and they think it's overnight or
I think it's
talent.
Overnight.
They were born that way.
Yeah, exactly. But what you're talking about is like put them out on the table, shine light on them. Let's talk about them. And the accountability is there to help drive it forward.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you have quarterly goals. How do you recommend going about aligning on KPIs to support those quarterly goals? And then how often should you be reevaluating, checking in on those?
Yeah. So, key performance indicators are valuable. Every manager has a department by definition in my world. So every manager, I want their boss to have a conversation with them of what are the 3 key performance indicators we're going to use to measure the performance of your group. Whatever group it is, we ought to be able to come up with 3 metrics. And so often goals for the quarter may relate to improving some of those KPIs. We're going to take, customer satisfaction rating from 40 to 45 this quarter or whatever the case may be. But I'm not managing directly from those KPIs because those KPIs, first of all, don't integrate across the business. Any of the data from those KPIs is sales-oriented or finance-oriented or marketing-oriented. And the purpose of the CEO is to drive the integrated output of the whole business. And so there's any metric you give me in a business aligns with one of the functional areas. There's no score for the business as a whole. That's the challenge. And so that's what goals help you do is kind of provide a meta language on top of the data that is functional in nature.
What does it look like when it works? Like, can you give us an example or a story? Name names or don't name names, but just, what does that look like?
Well, the best compliment I ever got was a gentleman who worked for me who told somebody when the system was running, the management was just like magic. Things just happened and there was just no friction involved. Everybody knew what everybody was was doing. Doesn't mean we all agree all the time. Certainly there are discussions and stuff, but there was no friction in getting anything done in the organization. And that to me is what you're trying to get to. Most organizations, what I've seen, especially when I've gone into big organizations, I've been acquired a couple of times by big organizations, taken over big organizations. What you see is not that people aren't working hard, but some people are rowing 30 degrees to the left of due north. Some of the people are rowing 30 degrees to the right of due north. And that creates friction, right? And we're just not all aligned perfectly on where we're going. People are working really hard. They're rowing really hard in the boat, but they're just not all clear because no one has given them enough specificity around where we're going so that they can align 100% on due north. And that's what a well-organized goal system can do for you.
Amazing.
And so how do you suggest balancing the need for these long-term strategic goals with the quarterly focus that you advocate for in the day-to-day operations?
Yeah, so I mean, those long-term goals are setting direction, but we're never going to get to those. We're never going to achieve those 3-year out goals because in 6 months we're going to look at them again and say, are those still accurate? And in a year we're going to push them out another year, and so they're always out there in the distance. So those are our guideposts. Those are the things we discuss with the board. Those are the things we discuss with every employee to give them clear direction and vision. But we're really managing by that quarterly set of goals. Most employees don't. I mean, they want to know that we have a plan 3 years out, but it doesn't impact their job day to day. It's those quarterly goals that really impact their job day to day.
How do you think about when someone says, I don't set goals, I just set habits? What do you think of that?
Well, I mean, where are we? If I don't know where we're going, I don't know what habits to set. You know, if I say, hey, you guys want to come climb a mountain. Okay, well, if we're climbing Kilimanjaro, that's a, fairly strenuous hike. If we're climbing Everest, that requires sophisticated and being in a lot better shape than most of us are, right?
Yeah.
And that's what most organizations do. They say things like, well, we want to go climb a mountain. Where, when, what, how, by when? All those questions are critical if you want employees to buy into the mission of the organization. If they can't see a direct path from what they're doing to where you're headed, it's really hard to keep people engaged.
I think where people falter, and it makes sense, is sometimes the goal is set. We want to hit $50 million in revenue. It's like, but then what? Like, what are the steps? What are the rocks to get there? Yeah. And so what would you tell someone that gets in that position where you just set all these goals? What's the process to start taking those steps to set the rocks?
That's why you got to get down to quarterly. If you just have goals out years in the future, yeah, we all want to sell for $1 billion or whatever, but that's not tangible enough. Again, most employees won't be able to take action on those long-term goals. But a quarter is a short enough period of time that you should be able to reasonably accurately predict what you can achieve in that quarter. And people can see how to do it. And now, if you have employees who are very young and very inexperienced, you may have to work with them to break the goals down to a set of tasks, but you want to engage them in that process. For example, a lot of companies, maybe you tell an employee, go take out a Facebook ad. Well, that's a task, okay? That doesn't require any thought. The goal should be, hey, what we want to do here is we want to generate leads for our sales team. And maybe that new employee knows that TikTok's a better ad source for our particular market than Facebook, or at least we ought to have that discussion and have that thought process. But most companies don't do that. They don't use the human intelligence. I love these conversations around the artificial intelligence, which I have a company very involved in, and I think it's going to provide great promise. But it's hilarious to me that most companies don't use much of the human intelligence they have in their company already.
Talk about that a little bit more. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So, a lot of people in the organization know more about doing their job than you do as CEO, especially when you get to any size and scope and you're out of it for any period of time. And so how do you engage those people? Well, again, if you tell them what to do, you're not asking them to apply any human intelligence. And I tell CEOs, if really you have a job that you can tell people exactly what to do, that's a job you probably should have already automated or maybe outsourced to a lesser cost geography. The reason to hire employees in the United States is because you need people who think, and to do that, they have to know where they're going and then let them figure out the best task to get there. And that is the way you get engagement. If you tell people what to do, they're not very engaged, okay? They're about like my teenage son taking out the trash, okay? They don't just jump to it and come running down the hall and grab the trash can and run it out, right? Because they're not engaged. They don't understand the purpose of the exercise. And that's what a lot of the CEOs skip the step of telling people why, where we're going, why they need to engage in the task. And it's just, no, here, do this, here, do this, do this. And that gets, again, they don't have to think. And so you're not engaging their brain, you're only engaging their manual dexterity.
So much of the success of what you're talking about relies on alignment. So especially in a bigger organization, what's the secret to alignment? You've got the CEO who sets the vision. You've got the C-suite who needs to be also setting it and also very bought into it. And then you've got everyone in the organization who probably has the most impact day to day on achieving that vision, right?
Yeah.
Alignment between all these parties, what are things to think about?
That's one of the 5 responsibilities as CEO is what I call owning the vision, which means practically you walk around a lot and you tell a lot of stories over and over again. You know, everyone that worked at Southwest Airlines back in the day knew this story of the Texas Triangle. They knew that one of the guiding principles of Southwest Airlines was to make flying fun, and that led to a whole host of decisions that Southwest made over time. And even to this day, 50 years later, if you get on a Southwest flight, it's different than an American or Delta flight. Yeah. Some people like it, some people don't, but it is different because there was a clear vision of how Southwest Airlines was going to approach the market differently. And that's what the CEO owns, is going around and telling those stories until you think you've told them 1,000 times and people start laughing at you. Here comes Joel telling that same story again.
Isn't that just called getting old? Like, I thought that's what that was. Well, my mom does that. Is she a CEO? Okay. All right.
I never wanted to be that person that you know, there's the old guy telling the same old story, but I tell CEOs you have to be that guy, that person that goes around, tells the same stories over and over because people don't get it. You think you've told everybody, but you know, every new employee comes in, they haven't heard the story, they're not motivated by the story, whatever.
Right. Yeah, that's fantastic. I think I'm on my way. I'm getting older every day and feeling it, so I think I'm on my way to achieving that. Yes.
Great.
Well, I love this. Just one comment in reflection of this conversation. Our unique lens from a marketing standpoint, running door number 3, is always from the brand alignment more so, which is super external, you know, the way people experience us. This goal setting process, this is all very internal. And then there has to be alignment there from the top down from a leadership standpoint. And then the way that gets expressed, you know, it impacts the public facing, the alignment of the brand.
Yeah. Well, you know, I view marketing as both internal and external. You know, there's absolutely an internal component to marketing that I want marketing's help with in telling the story and building the brand internal. Because if the brand isn't internal, it's not going to be external. It's not going to be shown to the world. Right. And so there's an external component. A lot of marketing people don't think about the internal component of marketing. And executives in general, I tell, you know, part of your job is marketing what your organization does to the rest of the organization. That's how you break down silos. Most people, especially in a very large organization, they never see any information about what the other group does. So often they're sitting around thinking, oh boy, if everybody just worked as hard as we did in this organization, things would be great, you know, because they don't see what other people are doing. And so one of the beauties of setting goals across an organization, sharing those goals, making it public, is that everybody can see, oh no, that other group's doing some stuff too. And we can have a disagreement on whether that marketing program they're running is the right program or not, but it's not like they're sitting there twiddling their thumbs doing nothing while I'm out here trying to sell stuff and getting no support.
That's a great reminder. I don't even think it has to be a big organization. I think it's a reminder for small organizations too, because you just get head down on what you're doing. And
yeah, absolutely.
You kind of just don't see it all.
It's human nature.
Yeah, that's right. For sure.
Joel, thank you for being with us. Again, this is so insightful. I've taken away just personally lots of light bulb moments. I know our audience will too. So thank you.
Yeah. Enjoyed it.